The massive viewing window of Earth's orbital command center displayed a sight that made Admiral Thomas pause. Against the backdrop of countless stars floated humanity's latest achievement, the warship Defiant. Its dark hull absorbed the distant starlight, making it appear like a shadow among the stars. The ship's unique design stood as a testament to human determination, combining stolen alien technology with humanity's raw ingenuity. Status report. Admiral Thomas called out to the control room staff, his eyes fixed on the warship. "All systems are operational, sir," replied Lieutenant Mark from his station. "Captain Miller reports the crew is ready for departure." The Admiral nodded slowly. They had poured every remaining resource Earth had into this single vessel. After the Great War that had depleted most of their fleet, the Defiant represented humanity's last real military project. Some had called it foolish to put everything into one ship, but the Admiral knew better. Sometimes the best punch was one thrown with all your weight behind it. In the Defiant's command center, Captain James Miller stood before his crew. The bridge hummed with activity as final launch preparations were underway. Through the main viewport, Earth slowly rotated below them, a beautiful blue marble that they would soon leave behind. "Engineering reports all systems green," called out Technical Officer Davis from his station. His fingers danced across the holographic controls, running last-minute diagnostics. The ship's hybrid systems, part human, part reverse-engineered alien tech, required constant monitoring, but Davis was the best at keeping them in harmony. Miller walked to his command chair, feeling the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. The Defiant wasn't just a warship. It was humanity's message to the galaxy. A message that said they wouldn't stand idly by while raiders terrorized peaceful civilizations. "Captain," called out Communications Officer Wilson, her voice cutting through his thoughts. "We're receiving a priority transmission from the Centauri Alliance. They're reporting multiple attacks on their outer colonies. Several settlements have gone dark." Miller's jaw tightened. The raiders were getting bolder. For months now, they had been striking across the galaxy, leaving devastation in their wake. The larger alien civilizations cowered behind their borders, too afraid to act. But humanity had never been good at standing down from a fight. "Plot a course to the nearest affected colony," Miller ordered. "Technical Officer Davis, begin power-up sequence for the jump drive." The bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. The Defiant's engines hummed to life, their unique sound a blend of human and alien engineering. Outside, the ship's energy collectors began to glow with a soft blue light. Admiral Thomas's voice came through the command channel. "Captain Miller, you understand the importance of this mission. The Defiant carries not just our hopes, but our future. We've intercepted communications suggesting these raiders are part of something bigger, something that's been terrorizing this sector of space for too long." "Understood, Admiral," Miller replied, watching as his crew made final preparations. "We won't let Earth down." The ship's AI system, nicknamed Echo by the crew, displayed the jump calculations on the main screen. Unlike pure alien AI systems, Echo represented a perfect blend of human creativity and alien processing power. "Jump coordinates locked," announced Navigator Jones. "All systems report ready." Miller took one last look at Earth through the viewport. They were about to venture further than any human warship had gone before. The Defiant might be just one ship, but sometimes one was all you needed to make a difference. "All hands, prepare for jump," Miller announced shipwide. "Let's show the galaxy what one human warship can do." The Defiant's engines flared brilliantly, creating a ripple in the fabric of space. In a flash of light, the massive warship disappeared, leaving Earth behind. Its mission had begun, to prove that sometimes the greatest changes in the galaxy could come from the most unexpected sources. As they jumped into the unknown, none of the crew realized they were about to become part of a story that would be told across the stars for generations to come. The Defiant emerged from its jump into a scene of devastation. The colony world of New Haven hung in space before them, its orbital stations torn apart and drifting like broken toys. Emergency beacons pierced the darkness, their desperate signals painting a grim picture of what had happened here. "Multiple debris fields detected," reported Officer Davis, his voice tight with tension. "Scanning for survivors." Captain Miller stood from his command chair, studying the tactical display. The colony's defensive satellites had been systematically destroyed, their remains scattered across orbital paths. This wasn't just an attack. It was a methodical dismantling of every protection the colony had. "Sir," Wilson called from communications, "I'm picking up a distress signal from the surface. It's coming from the main settlement's bunker complex." "Life signs?" Miller asked, already moving to tactical. "Confirmed. Approximately 300 colonists have taken shelter there." Wilson paused, her expression darkening. "But they're not alone. I'm detecting multiple unknown signatures surrounding the complex." The bridge crew watched as the tactical display updated, showing dozens of alien vessels surrounding the colony's main settlement. They were unlike anything in their database, organic-looking ships that seemed to pulse with an internal light. "Echo, analyze those ships," Miller ordered the AI. The ship's AI responded immediately, its neutral voice carrying through the bridge. "Analysis suggests biomechanical construction, detecting unusual energy patterns consistent with hive mind neural networks. Warning: multiple ships are actively harvesting genetic material from captured colonists." Miller's face hardened. They had found the raiders, and they were worse than anyone had imagined. "Battle stations. Prepare the main cannon." The Defiance crew moved with practiced efficiency as alert klaxons sounded throughout the ship. The raiders, finally noticing the human warship, began to move. Their ships rose from the surface like a swarm of angry insects. "They're attempting to establish a neural link," Echo reported. "Their standard tactic appears to be overwhelming enemy ships with synchronized attacks." Miller smiled grimly. "Good thing we don't fight like everyone else." "Davis, activate the neural scramblers." "Jones, plot an attack vector that puts us between them and the bunker." The Defiance engines roared to life as it dove toward the planet. The raider ships moved to intercept, their formations perfect, too perfect. They fought like machines, every move calculated and coordinated through their hive mind. "Sir, they're surrounding us," Jones reported, his hand steady on the controls. "Exactly as planned," Miller replied. "Now, Echo." The Defiance neural scramblers activated, sending out waves of carefully calibrated interference. The raider ship's perfect formation suddenly faltered as their hive mind connection stuttered. Individual ships began moving erratically, their synchronized attack falling apart. "Main cannon charged," Davis reported. "Target their command ship and fire," Miller ordered. The Defiance main cannon lit up the sky, its hybrid human-alien technology releasing a blast that cut through 3 raider ships before striking their leader. The organic-looking vessel burst apart, its destruction sending waves of confusion through the remaining raiders. "Launch rescue shuttles to the bunker," Miller commanded. "Let's get those colonists out while they're disorganized." The battle continued as the Defiance shuttles raced toward the surface. Without their perfect coordination, the raiders proved surprisingly vulnerable to human tactical thinking. One by one, their ships fell to the Defiance weapons. Hours later, as the last rescue shuttle docked, Miller stood in the observation deck watching the remaining raiders retreat into deep space. They had saved most of the colonists, but the victory felt hollow given how many had been lost before they arrived. "Sir," Wilson's voice came through his communicator, "the colony leader wishes to speak with you. They say we're the first ones who ever fought back." Miller's eyes narrowed as he watched the retreating raiders. "Well then, we better make sure we're not the last. Track their retreat vector. Wherever they're going, that's where we'll find answers." The Defiant turned to follow the raiders' trail, its engines glowing bright against the darkness. The first battle was over, but the war was just beginning. In the Defiant's main research lab, Dr. Anna Thompson stared at the holographic display showing dozens of attacked systems. Red markers dotted the star map like a deadly constellation, each representing a raided colony or settlement. She had been analyzing the data for 3 days straight, searching for any pattern in the attacks. Echo, run the temporal analysis again, she commanded, rubbing her tired eyes. The ship's AI compiled the data, showing the attacks in chronological order. This time, something caught her attention. Captain Miller to the research lab. She called through the ship's comm system. I think I'd found something. Minutes later, Miller arrived with Technical Officer Davis. The lab's lights dimmed automatically as Thompson expanded the holographic display. Look at this, she pointed to the attack sequence. They're not random. The raiders are moving in a spiral pattern, working their way inward from the outer colonies. But that's not the interesting part. She gestured, and the display shifted. Every attack happens exactly 7 days after they send out a specific signal burst. Davis leaned forward, his eyes widening. Those are the same signals we detected during the battle. The ones that seemed like background noise. Exactly, Thompson smiled grimly. They're not just signals, they're commands. The raiders are receiving instructions from somewhere, telling them exactly where and when to strike. Miller studied the pattern. Can we decode these signals? Already working on it, Thompson replied, bringing up another display. Echo and I have been analyzing them. They're unlike anything we've seen before, a mix of quantum data and biological markers. It's like they're receiving orders from a living computer. The ship's AI joined the conversation. Analysis suggests the signals originate from a central point, approximately 300 light-years from our current position. However, the source appears to move periodically. A mobile command center, Miller mused. That's why no one's been able to stop them. Every time someone gets close to figuring it out, the source moves. Davis worked at a nearby console, analyzing the signal patterns. Sir, I think we can use this. If we can predict where they'll attack next, we can get there first. Better than that, Thompson interjected. I think we can hijack their command signals. The raiders' ships are basically biological machines. They don't think for themselves. They just follow orders from the central intelligence. Miller watched as more data scrolled across the screens. Reports were coming in from other systems now, sharing stories similar to what they'd seen at New Haven. The raiders were harvesting genetic material, but why? What was the Central Intelligence planning? Sir, Echo's voice cut through his thoughts. I've detected another signal burst. Based on the pattern, they're targeting the Proxima colony next. Estimated time until attack: 6 days, 13 hours. Miller straightened. How long would it take us to get there? At maximum speed, 5 days, Davis calculated. We'd have time to set up a defense. No, Miller said, studying the data. We're not going to defend. We're going to set a trap. He turned to Thompson. How close do you need to be to hijack their command signals? Close enough to touch them, she replied. Their bioships are incredibly sensitive to external interference up close, but nearly impossible to affect at a distance. Miller nodded, a plan forming in his mind. Then we'll get close. Echo, send a message to Proxima Colony. Tell them to evacuate, but make it look like a routine drill. We don't want the raiders to know we're coming. As the crew began preparations, Miller took one last look at the star map. The pattern of attacks was clear now, a calculated campaign of terror designed to keep the galaxy's civilizations isolated and afraid. But that was about to change. They think they've perfected their hunting strategy, he said quietly. Time to show them that humans are pretty good hunters too. The Defiant's engines hummed to life as they set course for Proxima Colony. In 6 days, they would either strike a decisive blow against the raiders' command structure or learn firsthand why so many others had failed to stop them. Major Robert Wells crouched in the darkness of his stealth shuttle, watching through the viewport as another raider ship passed by. The Defiant's plan was working perfectly, too perfectly. The Proxima Colony below looked abandoned, its lights dim and streets empty, presenting exactly the kind of target the raiders couldn't resist. "All teams in position," whispered Wells into his comm unit. Around the colony, 3 other stealth shuttles waited in similar hiding spots, each carrying a team of specially trained soldiers. "Remember," Captain Miller's voice came through the comm from the Defiant, hidden behind Proxima's largest moon, "we need at least one of their bioships intact. Dr. Thompson's signal hijacker will only work if we can connect directly to their neural network." Wells checked his team's special equipment one last time. The neural disruptors they carried were experimental, built from the data gathered during their first encounter. They had one shot at this. If they failed, the raiders would adapt, and they'd lose their advantage. The first raiders began landing near the colony's central plaza, their organic ships pulsing with that sickly internal light. As the giant vessels touched down, portions of their hulls became transparent, revealing the horror within. Countless tubes and chambers filled with stolen genetic material from dozens of species. "They're deploying ground forces," reported Officer Wilson from the Defiant. "Counting 30. No, 40 hunter-gatherers." Wells watched as the raiders emerged from their ships. They moved with an unnatural synchronization, their armored forms gliding across the ground rather than walking. Each one was connected to the others through their hive mind, making them deadly efficient but predictable. "Now," Wells commanded. 4 stealth shuttles decloaked simultaneously, each firing electromagnetic pulses calibrated to the raiders' biosignature. The effect was immediate. The hunter-gatherers stumbled, their perfect coordination shattered as the pulses disrupted their neural network. Wells and his team rushed forward, neural disruptors firing. The weapons didn't kill. They did something far more devastating to a hive mind species. They isolated individual raiders from the network, causing confusion and panic among the usually organized force. "Major, you've got incoming," Davis called from the Defiant. 3 more raider ships breaking orbit. "Stick to the plan," Wells replied calmly, leading his team toward the nearest grounded bioship. Around them, the battle had descended into chaos. Without their hive mind coordination, the raiders fought like children, their movements clumsy and uncoordinated. The team reached the bioship's entry point, and Wells placed Thompson's signal hijacker on the organic hull. The device immediately began interfacing with the ship's neural systems, its lights pulsing in rhythm with the vessel's internal glow. "Connection established," Thompson's excited voice came through the comm. "The bioship's neural network is accepting our input. Echo, begin the upload." The Defiant's AI started feeding false commands into the raiders' network. The effect rippled through all connected raiders in the system. One by one, their ships began responding to human commands rather than their central intelligence. "It's working," Thompson exclaimed. "We're getting data back." "Wait." Her voice changed, becoming concerned. "Captain, you need to see this. The central intelligence, it's not just controlling these raiders, it's farming them, growing them." Wells and his team retreated to their shuttle as the raider forces fell into disarray. Above them, the Defiant emerged from behind the moon, its weapons charged but unnecessary. The raiders were no longer attacking. They were confused, their ships moving in random patterns as conflicting commands filled their network. "All teams, return to the Defiant," Miller ordered. "We've got what we came for, and more. Time to take this fight to the source." As the shuttles docked with the Defiant, Wells watched the raider ships begin to retreat. They had won this battle, but the data they'd stolen would reveal a truth far more horrifying than anyone had imagined. The central intelligence wasn't just controlling these beings, it was creating them, building an army of enslaved soldiers for some greater purpose. The Defiant's engines powered up, preparing to follow the retreating raiders. This time, they wouldn't just follow their trail, they would follow it all the way home. The Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel into a region of space, unlike anything the crew had seen before. The stars here were dim, obscured by massive organic structures that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The Raiders' home system was not a natural formation. It was a constructed nest of living technology. "By all the stars," whispered Officer Wilson from her communication station. The main view screen showed huge bioships being grown like fruits on massive tendrils of living matter. Smaller raider vessels moved between these growth pods like worker bees in a hive. "Echo. Full scan," Miller ordered, his voice steady despite the horrifying sight before them. "Find us that Central Intelligence." The ship's AI worked quickly, analyzing the bizarre structures. Central mass detected. The neural network signals are emanating from a core structure approximately 5,000 kilometers ahead. However, Echo paused, something the eye rarely did. The structure appears to be aware of our presence. As if confirming Echo's warning, the organic megastructures began to move. Countless raider ships detached from their growth pods, forming defensive patterns around the core. The trapped genetic material they had harvested from dozens of species pulsed within their transparent sections, powering their living hulls. "Sir," Davis called from his station, "I'm detecting something else. The genetic material in those ships, it's being used to grow more raiders. They're not just stealing life, they're using it to build their army." Dr. Thompson rushed to her console, analyzing the data. The Central Intelligence isn't controlling them. It's their parent. It's literally growing new raiders using harvested genetic material, programming them from birth to serve its purpose. Miller stood from his command chair, watching as more raider ships took position ahead of them. They had found what they were looking for, but getting to it would be nearly impossible. The Defiant was just one ship, facing thousands. "Echo, send the coordinates to our allies," he ordered. "But tell them to hold position at the system's edge. If we fail, they'll need to warn the rest of the galaxy." "Sir," Major Wells spoke up from tactical, "conventional weapons won't get us through that defense screen." But he paused, bringing up a new tactical display. "What if we use their own network against them? The neural disruptors we developed. At this range, we're close enough to affect hundreds of ships at once." Thompson shook her head. "The Central Intelligence would just reprogram them. Unless," her eyes widened, "unless we could upload a new program directly into the core, something that would change their basic directives." "Can we do it?" Miller asked. "We'd have to get close enough to physically connect to the core structure," Thompson replied. "Right into the heart of their nest." Miller looked at his crew. They had come so far, inspired an entire galaxy to stand up against its fears. They couldn't stop now. "Plot a course directly for the core," he ordered. "Major Wells, prepare your team for boarding. Dr. Thompson, get that program ready. Officer Davis, divert all power to weapons and shields." The Defiant's engines roared to life as it began its approach. The raider ships moved to intercept, their formations perfect and deadly. But this time, the human warship didn't try to fight them all. Instead, it fired precise bursts of neural disruption, creating corridors of confusion through their ranks. "They're adapting," Wells reported as more raiders filled the gaps. "The Central Intelligence is learning from each disruption." "Keep pushing," Miller commanded. "Echo, calculate the fastest route to that core. Whatever it takes, whatever we have to go through, we end this today." The Defiant plunged deeper into the organic maze of the Raiders' home system, its weapons blazing. Behind them, the way back to safety disappeared under waves of enemy ships. Ahead lay either humanity's greatest victory or its last stand. The Central Intelligence waited in its core, surrounded by its children, about to learn that the species it had dismissed as prey had become the most dangerous hunter of all. The Defiant dropped out of faster-than-light travel into a region of space, unlike anything the crew had seen before. The stars here were dim, obscured by massive organic structures that stretched for thousands of kilometers. The Raiders' home system was not a natural formation. It was a constructed nest of living technology. "By all the stars," whispered Officer Wilson from her communication station. The main view screen showed huge bioships being grown like fruits on massive tendrils of living matter. Smaller raider vessels move between these growth pods like worker bees in a hive. Echo, full scan, Miller ordered, his voice steady despite the horrifying sight before them. Find us that central intelligence. The ship's AI worked quickly, analyzing the bizarre structures. Central mass detected. The neural network signals are emanating from a core structure approximately 5,000 kilometers ahead. However, Echo paused, something the eye rarely did. The structure appears to be aware of our presence. As if confirming Echo's warning, the organic megastructures began to move. Countless raider ships detached from their growth pods, forming defensive patterns around the core. The trapped genetic material they had harvested from dozens of species pulsed within their transparent sections, powering their living hulls. "Sir," Davis called from his station, "I'm detecting something else. The genetic material in those ships, it's being used to grow more raiders. They're not just stealing life, they're using it to build their army." Dr. Thompson rushed to her console, analyzing the data. The central intelligence isn't controlling them. It's their parent. It's literally growing new raiders using harvested genetic material, programming them from birth to serve its purpose. Miller stood from his command chair, watching as more raider ships took position ahead of them. They had found what they were looking for, but getting to it would be nearly impossible. The Defiant was just one ship, facing thousands. "Echo, send the coordinates to our allies," he ordered. "But tell them to hold position at the system's edge. If we fail, they'll need to warn the rest of the galaxy." "Sir," Major Wells spoke up from Tactical, "conventional weapons won't get us through that defense screen." But he paused, bringing up a new tactical display. "What if we use their own network against them? The neural disruptors we developed. At this range, we're close enough to affect hundreds of ships at once." Thompson shook her head. "The central intelligence would just reprogram them. Unless," her eyes widened, "unless we could upload a new program directly into the core, something that would change their basic directives." "Can we do it?" Miller asked. "We'd have to get close enough to physically connect to the core structure," Thompson replied. "Right into the heart of their nest." Miller looked at his crew. They had come so far, inspired an entire galaxy to stand up against its fears. They couldn't stop now. "Plot a course directly for the core," he ordered. "Major Wells, prepare your team for boarding. Dr. Thompson, get that program ready. Officer Davis, divert all power to weapons and shields." The Defiant's engines roared to life as it began its approach. The raider ships moved to intercept, their formations perfect and deadly. But this time, the human warship didn't try to fight them all. Instead, it fired precise bursts of neural disruption, creating corridors of confusion through their ranks. "They're adapting," Wells reported as more raiders filled the gaps. "The central intelligence is learning from each disruption." "Keep pushing," Miller commanded. "Echo, calculate the fastest route to that core. Whatever it takes, whatever we have to go through, we end this today." The Defiant plunged deeper into the organic maze of the raiders' home system, its weapons blazing. Behind them, the way back to safety disappeared under waves of enemy ships. Ahead lay either humanity's greatest victory or its last stand. The central intelligence waited in its core, surrounded by its children, about to learn that the species it had dismissed as prey had become the most dangerous hunter of all. The Defiant's hull groaned under another impact as it pushed through the swarm of raiders. Its shields flickered, strained by countless attacks, but held firm. They were close now, so close to the central core that its massive organic form filled their entire view screen. "Hull integrity at 40%, Davis reported, his hands flying over the controls. "Neural disruptors operating at maximum capacity, but we're losing ground." Through the chaos, Miller spotted their target, a massive opening in the core structure that pulsed with biological energy. That had to be where the central intelligence resided. The same entity that had terrorized the galaxy for so long was right in front of them. "Major Wells, is your team ready?" Miller asked through the ship's comm. "Ready and waiting in the dropship, sir," Wells replied. "Just get us close enough." Thompson's voice cut through the command channel. "Captain, I've finished analyzing the core's neural patterns. It's not what we thought. The Central Intelligence, it's in pain. Has been for centuries." Before Miller could respond, Echo interrupted. "Warning. Multiple bioships attempting to merge into larger forms. The Central Intelligence is creating defensive organisms larger than any previously encountered." The view screen showed the horror of what was happening. Dozens of raider ships were combining, their organic hulls melding together into massive creatures that defied description. The stolen genetic material they carried was being used to create living weapons. "We didn't come this far to stop now," Miller declared. "Davis, divert all remaining power to the forward shields. Echo, plot us a collision course with that central opening. Major Wells, prepare for immediate deployment." The Defiant surged forward, its engines straining as it pushed through the final defense line. The newly formed creatures tried to stop them, but the human warship's hybrid technology proved stronger than their biological weapons. "Impact in 10 seconds," Davis shouted. "Now, Major," Miller ordered. The dropship launched from the Defiant's belly, carrying Wells and his team straight toward the core's opening. Behind them, the Defiant engaged the massive bio-creatures, buying them time with everything it had left. Wells' team fought their way through internal defenses, following Thompson's directions to the central chamber. What they found there stopped them in their tracks. "Captain," Wells transmitted, his voice filled with awe and horror, "the Central Intelligence. It's a child. A member of an ancient species, trapped in some kind of stasis field. It's been dreaming all this time, its nightmares creating the raiders." Thompson's voice shook as she analyzed the readings. The stasis field was meant to preserve their species, but something went wrong. Its fears and survival instincts manifested through the biotechnology, creating the raiders to protect itself. It's been gathering genetic material, trying to find a way to wake up, to restore its people. Miller made a decision that would change the galaxy. "Dr. Thompson, modify the program. Instead of trying to shut it down, send it a message. Show it that it's not alone anymore, that it doesn't need to be afraid." Thompson worked quickly, altering the neural program. Wells connected it directly to the stasis field's controls. Throughout the massive complex, the raiders stopped attacking. The bio-creatures began to dissolve back into their component ships. The Central Intelligence, for the first time in centuries, experienced something other than fear. The combined knowledge and experiences of humanity and their alien allies flowed through the neural network, showing it a galaxy united in peace rather than divided by terror. Slowly, the stasis field began to power down. The raiders, no longer driven by fear and survival, settled into peaceful formations. The nightmare was ending. "Send word to the fleet," Miller ordered softly. Tell them that the war is over, and we have a new species to help rebuild." The Defiant hung in space near the core structure, its hull scared but unbroken. One human warship had indeed ended the galaxy's fear, not through superior firepower or advanced technology, but through understanding and compassion. In the end, the greatest weapon against terror wasn't destruction, it was hope.